Many of you are very familiar with our climate challenge here in Massachusetts. Of course, the biggest slice of the pie in our greenhouse gas emissions right now is transportation, but right after that is buildings. And we know that about 80% of the buildings that we have here in Massachusetts today are going to be around in 2050, which means we really need to make them a lot more efficient and to electrify and get out fossil fuels out of the heating. That means that there's about 2 million buildings that we're going to have to retrofit. And so we picked triple deckers because it's a common building type that we have in Massachusetts. We think there's probably around at least 12,000 of them in the state. So there's a lot in Boston, a lot in Worcester, a lot in our gateway cities. And they are very old and very inefficient, which means there's a lot of opportunity there. Next slide. And so last year we did hold a triple decker design challenge. So this was really targeted at innovative proposals for architects and design build firms and builders to think about sort of two paths for how we would make this building type more efficient and to fully electrify these buildings. And so we had two tracks in the competition. One was focusing on taking the existing square footage of the building and retrofitting it and electrifying it. And the second track is really to add additional space, so perhaps an extra unit or two. And the thought being that that could change the economics of the retrofit to help cross-subsidize the retrofit of the entire building. We did make 9 awards. Those are available on our website, our Triple Decker Design Challenge website. And what we're asking for help with right now is our second phase of this effort. Next slide. And I'm handing it over to Meg, who's going to describe part 2.
Thanks, Bev. So like Bev said, this is sort of part 2 where we're actually hoping to get some of these retrofits built and see what they look like and what they cost. So this actual retrofit pilot, as we're calling it, has 3 components. We're going to offer participants technical support. That's the kind of core of what this RFP is about today. And then we'll also offer them incremental financial incentives on top of what's already available in the state, just to help make sure the high efficiency and electrification pencil out for these projects. And then finally, some performance monitoring, which is also a piece of this request for proposals today. We do hope to build on the ideas and creative proposals from the design challenge, and then get some of that real world data on cost, what kind of barriers come up, with an end goal towards taking these learnings and using it to kind of rapidly scale up the state's work in the triple decker building type. Next slide, please. So we're having 2 tracks in this triple decker retrofit pilot, and the one that the request for proposals today is touching on is affordable housing, which we have going on a little bit of a faster timescale. So the affordable housing track, well, really both tracks we want to hold out. We expect the majority of the awards will go for people who are just retrofitting a triple decker, but we want to hold out some funding under both categories for owners who want to add 1 or more units to the triple decker. And then we'll have some more details on this in the next couple of slides, but basically we hope to kind of bring this out to triple decker affordable housing owners this September, and then probably privately owned triple deckers at the beginning of next year. So if we go on to the next slide, we'll have some more details. So this is kind of around the timing of this particular RFP. Went out at the beginning of June, having the webinar today. Questions are due June 18th, and we'll have questions posted by the end of next week. And then responses are due July 2nd before the holiday starts. Hopefully not thinking about this on your holiday. And then we will do interviews by mid-July and hope to announce the selected awardee in August. And then if you go on to the next slide, thank you, Jacqueline. Like I said, the affordable track, we're really looking on the left-hand side of this slide here. It's everything I just said. If we're announcing the technical support consultant in August, then our hope is by September, we could open it up to affordable housing owners who own triple deckers. And I think our thinking on the timing there is we want to bring the technical consultant on board. We'll have drafted up a proposal for what incentives look like and just sort of the structure of the program, but we want to give the technical consultant we select a chance to kind of weigh in on that program design piece before we launch it to the building owners. And then we expect to actually start making awards and implementing, for the following year. I see a question coming in. Let me see. Is there any wiggle room on the definition of a triple decker? Could it be a 3-family, not too many true triple deckers on Cape Cod? That's a good question. I don't want to give a definitive answer here. I think it's something we haven't talked about. We are interested in like lessons that can be learned across the typology, but we do recognize that exactly what a triple decker looks a little different in different communities, like Worcester versus Boston have some different architectural looks. So I don't know, Jacqueline or Bev, if you want to quickly weigh in on this question before we go on, but I think maybe this is one we need to take back and
so this, I think, will be addressed when we open up applications for both the affordable property owners and for the privately owned owners. So I think that's something we can address at that point. We will definitely talk about it internally. But I don't think this is really for the technical consultant. So I don't think the answer will matter that much for this RFP.
All right, let's go on to the next.
The one thing that I didn't, and maybe this is in your next slide, Meg, I apologize if so, in terms of how many affordable housing triple deckers that we think we're going to be able to fund, we think it's in the range of about 10.
That's a good detail to call out, and that 10 includes, I think we're thinking of holding out about 3 for properties that add a new unit. So it's 10 total, including holding out some for an extra unit. All right, next slide. I'm going to hand things over to Jacqueline to talk about some of the real details in this request for proposals.
Great, thanks, Meg. So for this specific RFP, MassDEC is seeking qualified consultants that can provide technical assistance for those 10 affordable housing triple-decker owners. And the slide just shows the scope that we're looking for through this RFP. So first, we'd be asking for the selected consultant to help with the program design. So kind of help with refining the affordable housing triple-decker retrofit pilot strategy, including developing the incentive levels, recruiting applicants, and refining the recommended measures and approaches based on the lessons from MassDEC's triple-decker design challenge, and then also conversations that MassDEC has been having with building experts about the measures proposed in the design challenge. Task 2 would be providing an initial building assessment. And something that we're really looking for with the selected consultant is that they are able to work in coordination with MassSave's income eligible programs for 1 to 4 unit buildings. Task 3 would be providing technical assistance for project implementation. So providing kind of what recommended measures from the design challenge or from the list of recommended measures you would really recommend for each specific triple decker building, given that they might have different starting measures in terms of the energy efficiency upgrades needed or the HVAC upgrades needed or things like that. And then task 4 is analyze the recommended retrofit approaches. So for the first 3 triple deckers, we're anticipating that the technical consultant would be a little bit more involved and provide more testing and analysis just so we can evaluate the efficacy of the retrofit measures. And then task 5 would be performance monitoring. So we would like the selected consultant to work with triple decker owners to collect building energy and energy cost data for 2 to 3 years prior to the building modifications, and then also for 2 to 3 years after, and provide annual updates to Mass CEC. And then lastly, task 6 would be helping Mass CEC with the analysis of the program outcomes, how effective the recommended measures were for the triple deckers. So Mass CEC is anticipating awarding up to $150,000 under this RFP, and we're planning to pay the selected consultant hourly for the tasks that I just described. So this is a list of the documents for the request for proposals, and they're also listed on our triple decker retrofit pilot page. So there's the general RFP, which describes the scope of the project and how to apply in a little bit more detail. And then there's attachment 1, which is the authorized applicant's signature and acceptance form. Attachment B is the application form, and attachment C is the sample agreement. So to apply for the RFP, responses should be emailed to buildings@masscec.com by Friday, July 2nd at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. And each application should include a signed authorized applicant signature and acceptance form, a completed application form, resumes for all the team members that may work on this scope. And then every applicant should also plan to review the sample agreement. And if you have any concerns about the language or recommended changes, there's a place to put those in the application form. So this is just a screenshot of the first part of the application form. We'll ask for some general background about your organization, and then we have a place to put qualifications for the RFP. And specifically, we're asking for you to put down some your experience with Mass Save's income eligible programs for 1 to 4 unit buildings and the lean programs. And then there's also a place for applicants to describe your approach to the proposed scope. And then this is just the second part of the application form, where we'll ask for the hourly rates of the individuals that would work on this scope, and then a budget for each task. And the total budget should not exceed $150,000. So lastly, I just wanted to touch on how Mass CEC will be evaluating the submissions. So we'll be looking at the cost competitiveness, the overall quality of the proposal, the experience related to the project scope, experience with multifamily affordable housing, experience working with Mass Save's income eligible programs for 1 to 4 unit buildings or liens programs. And we'll really be looking at if applicants have experience with Mass Save's income eligible programs for 1 to 4 unit buildings. That's something that we really would like the selected consultant to work in coordination with Mass Save's programs. And then also, if you're partnering with another organization, we would like to see a demonstrated history of collaboration of the proposed partnership. And then lastly, if you hold a supplier diversity office certification as a diverse business enterprise or meet the criteria. So that's everything we have for you. Now we're happy to answer any questions that you have. And I see we have a question from Leadam Nori. Says, there was another lead technical consultant RFP earlier this year with similar objectives. Are they in correlation between the two? Meg, do you want to talk a little bit about the relationship with Decarbonization Pathways?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I realized when I saw it, I probably should have mentioned it and maybe ideally included like a little diagram. So Leadam's referring to, we have another pilot going called Decarbonization Pathways that is working on very similar work that is a little bit less restricted or focused on a particular typology. It is focused on residential buildings, probably low-rise residential. So, you know, a lot of single families, maybe some small multifamily, but not as focused on this one type like triple deckers. And we put out an RFP earlier this spring for a lead technical consultant to sort of design what the assessment and the recommendations for that pilot look like. We're we're going to have the two pilots sort of operating in parallel and sharing information between the two consultants, sort of back and forth. And I think the differences I would see, this consultant, this RFP that we're talking about today, we're looking for someone who can sort of come up with like what should those recommendations be, and then actually go out and do the assessment. So like all the whole piece together, and even as Jacqueline covered, like some post-performance monitoring. So like it's all together, and there has to be, we're really looking for a candidate that has good experience with the Mass Save low-income 1 to 4 family program. Whereas the RFP we put out for Decarbonization Pathways at this point was just sort of doing that initial program design of what does the assessment look like, what recommendations would come out of it, and then we'll sort of go out for a phase 2 of a consultant to do the implementation for that pilot. Now that said, we're planning to combine that implementation with the privately owned triple-decker track, just because they are so similar. And then between both sets of consultants, we're kind of planning that there will be an open exchange of ideas between the two pilots as we're starting to learn things. And one reason we did choose to separate them and wanted to kind of get this RFP for the affordable housing side going sooner rather than later was just to start to get out in the field and start to learn some things. And then that will cross-pollinate between the two pilots. So I don't know if that fully answered the question. Please feel free to follow up if I wasn't clear.
So another question we have is about the budget. So Mass EC has $150,000 for the 10 buildings, and William's asking that comes with 3 apartments each to about $5,000 per apartment, and asking if that's the correct budget. I think that on average is the correct budget. We're anticipating that through this RFP, we may spend more money up front on the first 3 triple deckers. And then once we've really looked at the recommended measures and tried out some approaches, then there may be less funding spent on later triple deckers. And some of that $150,000 would be used for the monitoring. So I don't think it'll quite average out to a set amount per apartment or per unit, but in general, we're anticipating spending up to $150,000 on this scope.
But to be clear, this is the time for the technical consultant, the money for the technical consultant's time. It is not, we will have additional incentives for the building owners, which may be a different amount. And probably for affordable housing tract, it'll be higher, a good bit higher than that number.
So another question we have is there a time frame for the overall project completion of all of the buildings? Bev, do you want to take that one?
Well, we don't know exactly. I would say the retrofits depend, some of it depends on how many applications we get and how quickly. I would expect the hardest ones are going to be the 3 that add additional units because of the permitting process involved. And so that could, be over 2 years, 2.5 years. I would expect most of the 7 retrofits to be within 1 year. But it's a little hard to know until we start getting applications. And we do need to have some diversity in terms of geographic distribution, as well as holding the 3 that are going to add the additional space. So it may take a while to get the right applications in.
I wanted to go back to Willem's question just quickly and note in the RFP in section 9, the budget section, there are some notes about like how we might suggest that people divvy up the budget between the different tasks that Jacqueline went over. So we were suggesting, even though if you do the simple math, it is what you say, it's 5,000 per unit, that we were suggesting kind of capping it at 4,500 per building, so per all 3 units, for some of the actual like in building work, and then leaving some more money for some of the other more cross-cutting tasks.
Another question that came through the chat is the consultant permitted to charge for additional value-added services like code compliance paperwork? Meg or Bev, I'm not sure if you want to chime in. That may be something that we would need to discuss further, and then could provide an answer to that later.
And maybe Chris, you can clarify. I think most of what you're talking about is if code is triggered with the additional units on those 3. And I guess things that we will pay for have to be within this budget. We haven't like clarified, I think most affordable housing that's going to be adding a unit or 2 units is going to be hiring an architect that is probably more likely to be doing that code compliance work. But I guess sometimes you would be hiring a HERS rater for those additional units as well. That's all something we can talk about on those 3. It's just that what we ourselves can fund is within this limit of $150,000.
That's all the questions we've gotten so far. If anyone else has any other questions, please feel free to type them into the Q&A. So another question from Chris is, are these units also eligible for the Mass Save renovations and additions programs?
So they are, but the much better value is to go through the 1 to 4 family low income program. They can do a lot more. And actually we believe that program has been very open-minded about trying to do a lot more things than they normally do as well. So I don't anticipate these ones going through it. I do anticipate the ones that are in the privately owned sort of market rate, potentially using renovations and additions as a funding source.
Okay, we'll give it another minute just in case anyone has any other questions. If you think of anything after this webinar is over, you can also email us at buildings@massey